All right, and let's get started. So welcome to today's session. Essentially, I'll be talking about accelerating Oracle workloads with VMware accelerators and best practices. Can you guys hear me at the back? Or you want me to shout a bit more? All good? All good. All right, good. So this is the agenda for today's discussion. I kind of whittled it down to fit into this 25-minute model. But after that, I will be at the booth. If you guys have any questions, feel free. I just told this gentleman here, you want to talk more about Oracle, you just have to buy me scotch. And trust me, I'll tell you, we can have a very good discussion, right? But moving on, what I would be focusing on is some of the improvements we did with guest operating system. I'll talk about the hot extend online Oracle RAC devices with virtual volumes. And I'll talk a bit on the Oracle Cloud Flex Storage and what enhancements we have done in the cloud, which will help Oracle workloads. But that doesn't mean it's only for Oracle workloads. I'm taking workloads from Oracle as a use case. Remove Oracle, put SQL Server, remove SQL Server, put SAP, everything works as a charm, right? But case in point being, all right, this slide, and I don't know if you have attended any of my sessions, but typically I flash these slides. I've been doing this for the last, I think, 12 years, using the same slide, just to send a point home, just to stress a point home that any business critical application, remember, it's not just the Oracle of the world, right? That could be your SQL servers, your SAP, and so on and so forth. They have a set of stringent requirements, right? RTOs, RPOs, business SLAs. I got to get the backups done in 3.5 hours because my production system is probably open at 9 o'clock. 9 to 6 is operation time. 6 to 9 in the night is probably data warehousing. 12 to 3 is backup, and everybody comes in at 6 o'clock and they're ready to go, right? So you have that window. But if you overspill the window, and being a production DBA that I was for the last 25, 26 years before I joined VMware, I know what happens if I exceed that production window, right? So there are certain requirements from a BCA or a business critical application specific, right? The availability, the performance, the recoverability. I mean, gone are the days when we used to go back to IT and say, look at it, I have a requisition slip. I need socket, I need cores, I need DIMMs, I need storage, right? Gone are those days. Those are like 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Now it's all about scaling up CPU on the fly, scaling up memory on the fly, hot adding VMDKs, hot adding VMX Net3 adapters, right? Moving to the cloud without any refactoring, without any replatforming. So scalability, horizontally and vertically, that's the mantra of the day here, right? All right. See, any workload design methodology, and it doesn't make a difference if you guys are running it on physical, you're running it on commodity x86, on any virtualization platform. Anything and pretty much everything starts from the very top. You have to gather requirements. You have to make sure that you sell it to somebody, right? Because somebody has to open up the purse string and say, sure, why don't you go over the project? Then you need to understand the current environment constraints. Because if you don't know what issues you are facing in the current environment, how would you then fix it in the target environment, right? And at some point of time, and that's the most critical part, the DB workload measurement, right? You have to know the nature of the beast if you want to control it. Because if you don't know the IOPS, CPU, memory, and disk utilization, how would you size it up, right? And sizing is not like, licking your fingers, sticking up in the middle of the air and say, I think on the physical servers we had 2-socket, 18 cores. So when I go to virtual, I'll have 36 vCPUs. Seriously, who told you that, right? Did you guys do some analysis? Did you do any kind of science project to figure out that 36 physical CPU cores is worth 36 vCPUs? Probably, and probably not, because your target servers could have higher clock speed. It could be, the newer and the faster servers, so you don't need that amount of physical cores to sustain your workload. So, case in point being, workload measurement, number one, numero uno, right? At some point of time, you guys have decided, okay, those are my 4 quadrants, CPU, memory, disk, and network. Let me do the migration. Now, your migration could be from, let's say, Exadata, physical x86, right? Or even the big Endian systems, right? The Solaris, the AIX, the HPUX, where you have to do a block format change, move it to x86. You got to figure all of that out. Once you do that, support and licensing, right? Talk to me about Oracle licensing after the session, right? Licensing, that's very important. Then I need to have design considerations. Those are your best practices. You don't want to come up with vCPU configurations like 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 when your servers are NUMA, right? You don't want to pick anything from thin air. You want to size it correctly. You want to have backup and recovery. You want to have HA, DR, monitoring, tuning. But if anybody in the audience can stand out and say, I got to do this for VMware. No. This is the same thing that you would do when you move from x86 to x86. Right? Whether it's Exadata, or whether it's from x86 engineered systems to x86 commodity, whether you move it from one virtualized system to the other, it's the same process. Again, sending a message across that you don't have to do anything topsy-turvy, anything funky when you virtualize your Oracle workloads on a VMware platform. And that's what will happen. This is exactly what I see in every customer environment. So I'm ex-PSO, I'm ex-services. We are part of GTS, or we were part of GTS called the Global Technology Services. We are responsible for doing workload study, characterization, writing those papers. When we walk into a customer environment, I say 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Virtual machines not set up for NUMA. When your servers are NUMA, right? Setting hot at vCPU, which basically turns vNUMA off. I know we fixed it in 8.0, but prior to 8.0. So this is very important. You got to measure your workloads. All right. Not always can you actually take that approach. And here's the reason why. Your use case could be my CIO, my director basically told me, I got 15 days, I got a month, I got to move these bunch of servers, right? From point A to point B being VMware, cloud first. Or let's say it's virtualization first. I don't have the flexibility of time to measure the workloads. What do I do? In that case, quick and dirty, use VROps or use live optics, right? Or essentially have an estimate of your vCPU, memory, disk, and network, right? Wherein you move it to the physical architecture. See, there are pros and cons to every approach in life. The pros to that, it's the fastest. You don't have to worry about it. What's the cons? 6 months down the line, you go back and you start looking at VROps. Oh, man, I bought 1,000 servers from this particular vendor of choice, but look at it. I hardly need 400. What do I do with the other 600? I got to think of it. See that? You now have wastage of servers. When you start looking at the other side, where you do have some essence of time, that's the approach you want to take, where you measure the workload, correct? And then you rightfully size what that workload should look like in a virtual machine. You would do the same thing when you move from a physical to physical. You wouldn't just go and say, okay, fine, I came in from HP, I'm going to buy Dell, I don't care about the number of socket and cores, I'm just going to stick some socket and cores, and I'm going to pray to God that it works. That's not how things work, right? You will do right sizing. So right sizing, very important. What happens is when you start looking at those right sizing, and I don't know, people in the back can probably read those fonts, but I'm sure these slides or this recording will be available to you, right? Typically, like I said, if we have to approximate it, use live optics or the DPAC, right? Use those tools. What happens is if you run it for, let's say, a peak period, again, the magic here is how do we measure it? Should I just run it for Sunday and Saturday night when everybody's having a party? No. I have to go back to the business and ask the business, okay, what time does the business work? 9 to 5. What's the peak period? 9 to 11 is when it's peak. Okay, let me run the live optics 9 to 11, Monday to Friday, right? If I were to run it for 2 weeks, I at least know the peak. I know the low of CPU, memory, disk, and network. That will at least get me started. A good straw man. That's to do with the approximation side of the house, right? When you start looking at the actual workload measurement, where I said you have the essence and the time of the day to do that study, I typically look at 3 things. I look at SpecInt, and I don't know how many people in the room here have heard of SpecInt or spec.org. Right? With spec.org, what it means is you have this kind of servers or this class of servers, and you have this class of servers, how many cores and how many sockets and what clock speed kind of matches here, right? Because that gives you a good idea. If I have 100 of this kind, how much servers should I think or should you think I should procure from this vendor, right? When you look at SpecInt, 99% of the time it will tell you you don't need 100. You might need 100 minus something. Great. I got one thing, right? I at least know the number of target servers. Is that enough? Nope. What I need to do then is I need to start looking at the Oracle workload measurement. When I look at the actual Oracle workload measurement along with the operating system statistics, it'll then tell me your universal set was 100 minus something. You actually need 50. See, I am honing in, I'm zooming in. I zoomed in from 100 minus something to 50, so I'm actually sure that based on the current workload, I need 50 servers. Do I stop here? No, I don't stop here. Because I haven't taken capacity planning, I haven't taken forecasting into account, right? So I go back to the business and say, okay, in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, do you think the data is going to grow? The guy will say, yes. How much? Delta D, Delta vCPU, Delta memory, right? So then I go back and say, my result plus Delta D plus Delta vCPU plus Delta memory, I need so much of servers, which means I will be good for the next year, year and a half. That is the same thing that one would do when you move from one platform to the other platform. So again, I'm going to keep reiterating the same point here. This is not anything to do with VMware. This is industry general best practices that I'm just throwing at you guys. Right? Again, migration. So whether you come from a big Indian system to the little Indian, and for people who are unaware of the big Indian, little Indian, essentially it's like a block format change, right? So when you go on to the AIX, the SolarX, the HP of the world, I'm sure And I don't know how many Oracle DBAs are here in the room, but when you talk to the Oracle DBAs and you say, hey, you know what, just move it from point A to point B, the guy comes back, nah, I can't do it that way. I got to go back. I have to use RMAN. I got to use data guard. I have to move the data from one point to the other. He and she is absolutely correct, because look at the bottom of the slide here. The block format is different on the big endian and the little endian, which means you just can't suck the data in and throw the data out. You have to transpose it. You have to transform it. And you got to use the Oracle tools to do it, right? So whether you're coming out the big endian system, whether you're coming from Exadata is x86, or if you're coming from, let's say, another virtualization platform, your KVM, the LVMs, the OVMs of the world, right? When you land onto VMware, these are considerations that you have to keep in mind. Again, I'm going to give you guys a very high-level overview. I'm not going to turn you guys into Oracle experts or Oracle DBAs. If you want, meet me after the session, and I'll give you a bit more pointers here, right? Best practices, the buck stops here. The buck stops here. This is it. This is the most important thing, right? Please don't configure your vCPUs as 13579. If you wish to do that, please don't call me. Please don't call GSS. Fix it yourself. That's it. I can't be any more clear than that, right? Because that's typically what happens. I'll give you an example. 2-socket 10 cores. You have a server. That's 2-socket 10 cores, right? Typically, we say the vCPU, keep it as a factor of the number of physical cores, right? We don't say configure that for hyperthreads. Why? Hyperthreads doesn't double the performance. It just gives you 20 to 24% boost, right? You need that when that guy in the end of the room throws an ugly bad query, correct? You need that extra headroom. So we configure your vCPUs, or we set your vCPUs to the number of physical cores. So in this example, 5, 10, 15, 20 is good, not 13579. The best way to find out, if you want to set up 13579, do that. Go to ESX top, correct? You guys are VMware specialists. You guys know that. MFGV. Go to the NUMA screen. When you see the NUMA home migration increasing, right? From 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You've done something really bad there. You have to go back to the drawing board, right? So at every stage, when you make a change, you go back to the drawing book to figure out if the change has actually improved or it's deteriorated. That's one of the ways to do it. Again, we won't have much time to go into all of the best practices, but the links at the bottom of the slide are Oracle best practices link. Again, you will see here a recommendation from the operating system, a recommendation from Oracle Corporation, recommendation from VMware, like things like vCPUs, memory reservation, NUMA, guest I/O schedulers. Should I just leave it at deadline? Should I just leave it at CFQ or even BQ, right? Multi-queuing or SCSI MQ. What should I do? None, NONE or NOOP, right? Why? Because you have ESXi that has an I/O scheduler. ESXi has a mind of its own. You don't want the guest operating system I/O scheduler to collide with the ESXi I/O scheduler. You don't want that. You want things to go down the pipe, right? VMware, PV-SCSI adapters. Everybody heard of PV-SCSI adapters, right? Everybody knows about VMX-Net 3. Should I just leave it at default queue? Yeah, you could. But will your workload work? No, it won't. So what do? You increase the queue depth of a VMDK, increase the queue depth of PV-SCSI, right? So these are things that you guys have already heard about. You're doing it every day of your life for other workloads, right? That's what the best practices goes into. It's like a one-stop shop where you have all the best practices put together. So very important. But I'm going to move on beyond that, right? If I have to design a virtual machine, and I know we're not designing virtual machines here in this 25-minute session, but if I have to do that, I would do it this way. And this doesn't mean this is the only way to do it, right? There are multiple ways one could do it. If you look at it, what I've done here is I've set the operating system and the Oracle binaries, SCSI 0. I put the data on SCSI 1 and SCSI 2. I put the redo on SCSI 3. Why? Can anybody say why? Because queue depth, load balancing, fairness. Remember, nobody in his or real mind would ever go to the market, buy a server, buy a single port HBA, put it to, let's say, Fabric A, and basically say, I'm done. My fan in, fan out ratio is great, right? No, that's bad. That's bad setup, right? Similarly, you want to make sure that you set up your VMDKs for specific PV-SCSI controllers. You set the queue depth. It's like this. When you are onboarding a freeway, right? You have an 8-lane freeway. But if I just give you one board to go to the freeway, there's a choke here, correct? So I need to increase the lane of the on-ramp so you guys can get onto the 8-lane freeway so you guys can go fast. That's the whole thing about it. PV-SCSI queued up, BMDK queued up, and so on and so forth, right? That's one of the reasons why I did that. If I have to switch gears, if I have to configure an Oracle rack, that's exactly what I'll do. I didn't change anything here. You know what I did? I took the CRS, I took the vote, and I stuck it on SCSI 3. CRS doesn't do anything. It's only for cluster membership. Vote, cluster membership. It has a cluster registry. Is there any IOs going through that? No. Is there any IOs going through redo? Yes. Who is the most important guy in the room here? Not me, not you. Redo. The redo log files, they need to be given their own SCSI controller. You give them their own SCSI controllers. How about my backups? How about my FRA, my flash recovery area, which is archive log and backup? This guy, because OS doesn't do anything. There is no IO going through OS. There is no IO going through your grid infrastructure binary mount. Nothing goes through that. This guy is doing nothing. So I stuck the archive and the backup here. See what I've done? I have basically done it from a load balancing perspective. Again, one way to do it. You guys can design it in another way. The design for this comes from your workload, not from me or not from you. It comes from your workload. When you run your Oracle AWR, and I don't know how many people have heard of Oracle AWR, Automated Workload Repository. See, what happens is, think of it, every intelligence system in this world, every intelligence system in the world takes snapshots of itself, right? You know Linux operating system, right? So Linux will take snapshot. That's why when you go and do SAR minus F, you run a SAR 5000, it tells you, right? CPU utilization for every 10 minutes. See, Linux does that. Windows does that. Similarly, in the Oracle world, the Oracle database, if we have the diagnostic pack, that's to extract all these reports. But the Oracle database will take snapshot of itself. The default is 60 minutes. Every hour, the Oracle database will say, take a snapshot, take a snapshot, take a snapshot, right? If I were to walk to you, and if I say, okay, 9 to 10, tell me, can you tell me what was happening in the database? The DBA says, I got it. I'll just run the report from 9 to 10. These are the batch SQLs that were running. This guy ran a batch SQL and something happened here. I can use it for performance tuning. I can use it for troubleshooting, right? That AWR is that double-edged sword. That's what will help you to determine, do I need to put my data, my temp and undo on the same VMDK, on the same PV-SCSI controller, or can they go on the different, right? I'm sure you'll do the same for SQL as well. You'll do the same for SAP or Java or any other workload. This is no different here. My bug doesn't stop here because all I did was I just designed a virtual machine. I came up with a couple of PV-SCSI controllers and VMDK. I just ported my data, but I gotta test it, right? I gotta make sure things work. If I don't make sure things work, how can I go back to my DBAs and say, hey, here you go, this kingdom or this castle is not gonna crash. I gotta test it. What do I use to test it? Again, the best way to test it is the real application workload. There's nothing as good as that, right? But it's expensive. There's a tool from Oracle called RAT, and I'm not Oracle, I'm not trying to sell you guys anything here, but there's a tool from Oracle called RAT, Real Application Testing, where it captures all of the SQLs and replays it. That's the best you can do. If you don't have that flexibility of doing it, you can use synthetic workload generators. But remember, what are you exactly trying to achieve? Benchmarking or testing your workload? Because many a time people, they come back, many customers they come back to say, oh, this particular piece of hardware, how many IOPS can you push? Can you push 1 million IOPS? My question back to this, are you going to throw 1 million IOPS? Right? It's like you going to a dealer and saying, give me this biggest and the baddest car that you have, right? The Ferrari or the Lamborghini. And the guy's like, where are you going to drive it to? Oh, just the grocery store. Seriously? You want to take a Lamborghini to a grocery store? You can. I don't have the money, but you could if you want to. You see what I'm saying, right? It makes no sense to do benchmarking, where at the end of the day, all you want is workload measurement, right? Because we hear benchmarking from the industry, but that's not what real workloads are. All right, accelerators. So I think I probably need another slide once we go to another version of ESXi, because we have been going by leaps and bounds, right? I just throw this slide here just to show you guys that we have been increasing our vCPU, memory, our disk, our limits, right, from different version to different versions here. These are so many features that we had for business critical applications. Starting 6, I cheated, I didn't put 5.0, I should have probably put 5.0 here, right? But I'm sure most of you guys would either be on 6 or probably on 7 and going over to 8. And if you look at 8.x, look at all the stuff that came out for business critical application. Again, Oracle, it's not specific for Oracle. It's specific for business critical application. Oracle can take advantage of any of those, features, right? If you're running Oracle RAC on vSphere, look at all the enhancements we've done since Oracle 5.0 days. We've come a long, long, long way here. Every release, we made sure we have something for the workload. Because at the end of the day, nobody buys vSphere or nobody buys any cloud because it's beautiful. No, you buy it because you want to run workloads. That's why you buy platform. That's why you buy infrastructure here, right? All right. So I think I have like 7 minutes. I probably should be able to cover a bit more. But this is important, right? And I don't know how many of I am assuming most of you guys are Linux guys, right? So what happens is when on Linux, when you go to, let's say, a particular disk, you start looking at the disk, there's a parameter called max sector KB, right? That's how much IO I can push on that particular disk, which is a VMDK at the end of the day, correct? And what happens is there's another parameter called max hardware sector KB. That's set on the driver level. That's what the hardware vendor basically says, die cannot push more than that. You cannot push more than that. Unfortunately, what's happened is we haven't been able to expose those metrics to the guest operating system. So right now, I can go, if you go right now to if you go to RHEL 7, go to OEL 7, SUSE Debian, do a cat, go to ET, what's that? sysclass block, right? If you go to the particular device, you go to NRQs, or you go to this particular file, you cat it, you will see this is set to 32767. 32767, which essentially is 32 megabytes. What happens is, right, now you get a false sense of security. Wow, I can push 32 megabytes on an IO, right? You start running your workloads, you go back, look at ESXtop, you're like, man, I was able to set it to 32 megabytes. I'm not even able to push more than a megabyte, more than a megabyte. You go back and see, is something wrong? No, nothing is wrong. Here's the thing. Just because you set this to 32 megabyte and you set this factor to the same 32 megabytes doesn't mean I'm going to push 32 megabytes. I'm the storage, right? Every storage has a limitation. Pure, for example, is capped at 4 meg. 4096 kilobyte. That's it. It's capped at 4 meg. You cannot push more than 4 meg. That's the IO size. So what happens is, since we don't expose these metrics, you are at a disadvantage here. So we basically fixed it. So this will be releasing at 8.0 U3. What happens is, by setting these metrics correctly, you will be able to achieve the same performance as you had, plus you will have a correct picture of doing it, right? How many people have heard of vVols? I mean, there are a lot of sessions here. There's a session that Jason will be doing. I think I have a session with Jason right after this, maybe an hour later, where we talk about virtual volumes. But in a nutshell, let me tell you, if you're looking for a solution at the end of the day, it's vVol. I don't want to say anything more than that. If you're looking for a solution for your workloads, at the end of the day, it's virtual volume. How many people love RDM? Let me look at all the RDM lovers here. No. How many people have heard of DBS coming and asking them for RDMs? Everybody. Oh, give me an RDM, give me an RDM. Me, right? Right? Can you give an RDM to a guy? To an Oracle guy, he'll say, give me a 5 gig for the redo, give me 10 gig for the data. I want another 10 gig for the undo. You see that? You see what I'm coming with? The number of SCSI slots, I'm eating up a lot of these SCSI slots. And then when you reach 512 or 1024, you say, sorry, dude, I have no more RDMs to give you. I got to go give you another cluster, correct? That's vVol. vVol solves the problem. You talk about noisy neighbor, vVol is nothing but an RDM at the end of the day, right? So in this case, if you're looking at having your cake and eat it too, air quotes, that's vVol. vVol basically solves your thing. I understand that the storage vendors basically have to get vVol on the storage area, but when you go back home, talk to your vendors. There are a lot of use cases. The vVol session that I have will go more into depth in that. But from a performance standpoint, people said, okay, that's great. vVol is great. Can you show or can you tell me it actually beats VMFS performance? Yes, it's an RDM. It's an RDM. I don't have the overhead of VMFS. I don't have the overhead of VMFS. So that's what I did. I had 2 VMDKs, right? And 1 VMDK, PV-SCSI controller, all best practices, set up on VMFS, run my slob. I don't know if people know what slob is, but set for silly little Oracle benchmark, written by Kevin Clausen, a good friend of mine. The only thing it does, it sends IO, right? And what I did here was I basically set the Oracle SGA to 32, which means I am pushing a lot more IO from the Oracle database down to the disk. And the numbers I got from vVol, they were great. 78K versus 70, 78K versus 70, right? So I am getting performance from a vVol, right? Again, if I had to do 2 VMDKs on PV-SCSI, my performance numbers increases here. And at some point in time, so till now we saw performance improvement on the guest operating system because there's a lot of fixes that engineering is going to do. We saw vVol versus VMFS, and you saw me advocating vVol, and you'll probably see me advocating vVol in the next session after this, right? But if at some point in time people go to the cloud, right? Many people have heard of the Cloudflex storage, right? Everybody have heard of Cloudflex storage. The, what's that? The smart cloud, or what is that? Scale out. The scale out file system, where essentially you are able to scale out on the fly here. Question back to you guys. Is the performance good? Is it bearable? Or is it really good? It comes very close to vSAN. It comes very close to vSAN. And this is what I want to take some time and talk to you about, right? So we had a 4-node VMC cluster, i3 Metal, ESX 8.0, so it's not on the old platform. What again we did was, that was the latest and the greatest Oracle version, 21.5, ASM storage. We ran it with 2 custom policies. Because I think like a DBA, right? I'm a paranoid guy. I think like a DBA. How about we set OSR equal to 100%, right? Object space reservation, 100%. Let me make sure I have no RAID, no mirroring. I don't want to have RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 6. No mirroring, OSR 100%, go, right? So we ran this workload for archive log, for backup, and for test databases. We did the same thing using just the default vSAN policy. Just look at the numbers here. The difference between what we did for the custom policy versus the vSAN storage policy on vCloud Flex, there was a 4.1% difference, which means, yes, you could run your databases on Smart Cloud file system. You could do that. Question back to you. Does it mean that, yes, are you asking me to run my production databases on that? No. Because at the end of the day, the workload profile determines where it has to land. Production databases, vSAN, right? Because that's your tier 1 databases. If you have to move your test, your dev, your, let's say, staging, your financial, right? Anything that's pre-prod. Yes, that could be a great use case for you. When you go to the cloud, you have to use archive logging, right? You have to store your archive log somewhere. And your backups as well. So I think we are almost, I don't know, I probably have like 40 seconds more to go. But if there's anything you guys want to take away from this 25-minute blazing talk, where I don't know if you guys got a lot of what I said, right? But I will be available at the booth. That's just one link here. Pretty much anything that we produce, right? From a workload perspective, licensing perspective, best practices, things to do, things not to do, technical blogs, everything can be found here. But I think I'm at the end of the session here, and he's basically going to kick me out if I don't move out from here. But thank you. Thanks for coming. I will be again available at the booth, right, all day tomorrow, right? Come talk to me, and I'll be looking to have a discussion with you, sir. All right? Thank you.